Okay, I guess we should probably just kick it off, and as people join late, they'll come up to speed. Um,
Perfect.
let me let you know. I'm joined here by my co-host Michelle Landis. She's a landscape architect with Studio West Landscape Architecture. My name is Jim Brown. I'm an architect with Public Architecture in San Diego. You might be wondering why we are here on such short notice. Well, everyone in this group is a stakeholder in one way or another to this important site, Friendship Park. You know the site and have used the site more than perhaps the general population of San Diego or Tijuana, and your feedback is really important to us. But why the short notice? Well, 4.5 weeks ago, the Friends of Friendship Park was called into Border Patrol headquarters to hear that they had made a decision on restarting construction of the 30-foot tall walls that they've been building all along the border between Mexico and the United States. You may recall that Joe Biden, when he was elected president, put a temporary halt to wall construction. And to our great relief at the time, the walls, the 30-foot tall walls, which they were going to build both the primary fence and the secondary fence 30-foot tall, they had stopped building it just short of Friendship Park, just on the east side of Yogurt Canyon, which is a canyon just to the east of the Bull Ring, if you can kind of see where that is. And we'll show you some maps about that. Now, let me show you in a more visceral way, because we know the park backwards and forwards. So when they said they were going to restart construction anytime now, and they meant like eminently start construction, we were prepared. I guess we were prepared to hear that. We were hoping we would not hear that, but in the back of our minds, we were prepared. So we rejected that proposal at the meeting. We had, in the meantime, been working with our elected representatives to get virtually every elected representative wrote a letter opposing the walls and asking for a pause of 120 days in construction, while so that we could get stakeholder feedback on this terrible idea. Let me show you a couple images now, just to show you what that will mean. Let's see if I can click the right one. Do you guys see that okay?
We do.
Yeah, okay. So here's what the 30-foot tall walls will mean to us. There's where they stopped, and you can see almost twice as tall as what we have now. All the way from there, a couple thousand feet, not just one wall, but two walls, the primary wall and the secondary wall, all the way to the beach. Let me show you something else. This one here. Let me show you how it will impact. Now let me show you how it will impact the Tijuana side. Is that image big enough? Let me do that. There we go. So you're going to see that same 18-foot tall wall. Imagine it almost two times as tall right there. Let me just pause that for a second. Just under 2 times as tall obliterates any view of the beach to the north. Let's keep going east. It obliterates any view continued out to sea. I would say, if you can see my cursor, probably to about this point. I think that's the little edge of Point Loma there. About this point. Incredibly destructive to the view shed of Tijuana. Finally, let me show you a little bit about when the typical person comes to Friendship Park. This is parking at Borderfield State Park. Parking in the parking lot there. These are kind of looking to the west. We're going to hook around the bathroom. You might be able to hear my dog barking in the background. I apologize. Okay, imagine almost twice as tall. This here, the lighthouse, you won't see that. You won't even see a hint of it. And the wall construction that they're using is spaced so tightly, you can also not see through it from the side. You will see nothing. Almost twice as tall with zero visibility. It's quite upsetting. So this is what we were faced with at the meeting. This is why we're so desperate to get community stakeholder input. Let me stop this for a second just to point at this structure. Years ago in 2011, or it might have been 2010, when they built this secondary wall, we had negotiated successfully with Border Patrol leadership at that time to, instead of a fence, install a 60-foot long rolling gate into the secondary fence. Now, it's still, it's not perfect, but it did kind of have the feeling when we used to have large events in between the double fences back then. It would give some relief to the park, to that Friendship Park, and make it not seem quite so much like a cage. Imagine the fence going all the way down. Hold on. This is worth just backing up a hair. Apologize. Imagine this 30-foot tall fence all the way down to the sand right there. Now, as we walk towards the secondary fence, you won't remember, keep in mind, you won't see through it. You won't see the lighthouse on the other side. And then as we get closer, the primary fence also is 30 feet tall. So the primary fence almost blocks all but the upper reaches of that lighthouse. Okay, just wanted to, let me end share. We just wanted to give you a little bit of a visceral feel, a visual of what's at stake. So it is under these circumstances that we're undertaking now some true stakeholder input. That's why you're here. We're giving orientations. This is our third of 4. Tomorrow at 6:30 is our last one. And then we want every stakeholder to please, it's really important to follow up with the survey and tell us what your dreams of what the 2 border walls and also the space in between could be. I mean, what kind of criteria could they undertake to make them a little bit more palatable? That's your job. And then on Friday, September 9th, we have a design team made up of landscape architects, urban planners, theorists, professional designers. They are going to convene armed ahead of time with all of your stakeholder information, all of your hopes and dreams for this important space. And that's a bit of a job, huh? They're going to be looking for commonalities. These people have done these kind of charrettes before. They know how to do it. There's a really talented facilitator, Rob Lane, who will be leading this crew, trying to sort out threat pull strings, sort out commonalities, start to build a design. And sometimes they're working on more than one plane at one time. One designer might be just working on one little piece. Others might be working on a master plan. It's pretty free flowing. So they'll work between 8 in the morning and 4 p.m. trying to put something on paper. At 4 p.m., between 4 and 6, you, the stakeholders, will come to San Diego State. We have a room dedicated just for this study, and then get a presentation on where the designers are at that moment. This is not a finished product they'll be showing you, but there'll be a time for robust feedback. And also present, we hope, we trust, will be Border Patrol. Border Patrol is also a stakeholder here, just like you are. So they have their concerns. Everyone in this room right now has their separate concerns. Sometimes they're going to overlap, and the designers are really good about like pulling those threads and finding those things. So then what will happen at the end of that first day, after the robust interaction, day 2, the designers show up at 8 a.m. again. This time they have some feedback to alter their designs. They'll work all day from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. and really get to it. They still may not only have one plan, they still may have a series of concepts, but you'd be surprised at how well they can do at like listening and reporting back in the form of physical manifestation. It'll be a really fun process to watch. At the end of that second day, which is September 10th, at 4 p.m., you, the stakeholders, are encouraged to again come to San Diego State and listen to the outcome of the charrette, and still offering suggestions, criticisms. What do you love? Because I suspect, in fact, I know that there will be continued design noodlings, getting things as right as they can. We assume that on that second day, there'll be more people than just we're hoping for 25 to 30 on Friday. On Saturday, there's going to be that same number plus I think some members of the press, perhaps some elected representatives, and other people in the community that want to just come out and see it. So that's the context of what we're doing. And I want to remind you, the people that are joining this meeting, go ahead and put your questions as they come up in the chat now. So then we can address them. When we can address them, I'm not really looking at the chat, unfortunately, but many of my colleagues are. So if a question comes up in the middle of the presentation, that's totally cool. We don't have to go through the presentation and wait to answer it. All right, let me show you another exhibit and give you a little background. One more time. We need your voice and we need your input. That is the power of what we're about to do. We can't do it without your input. It's the most critical role in this whole process.
Jim, did you want to talk a little bit about what will then ultimately be delivered to Customs and Border Protection after the charrette and we've synthesized all of this?
Well, yeah, a series of, hold on, let me pause my share. Well, yeah, what will be presented to Border Patrol is the results of our design charrette, like many drawings, diagrams, verbal descriptions. It's a total package of designs from the designers. Now, we're not naive enough to think that Border Patrol is simply going to bid these drawings and start building them. However, it is going to be a really strong representation of what we want. And not only us, but also our elected representatives, everyone that works and plays in this zone. I think they're gonna listen. They are also, we've been told they're gonna hold their own outreach sessions, but they have indicated to us that they are strongly considering attending ours, and they really should. They must, I think. And I think they're starting to see that we're doing this in good faith. These designers are going to take the input and they're going to try and craft a plan that works for the majority of people. So I have a lot of optimism about the event. All right, let me show you what the site is and what the concerns are. If I can find it. No. Let me stop share and try that again. It's somewhere in my computer. Oh, there it is. Sorry about that, people. I have like 10 things open. Okay, can you guys see that okay? Let me go start show and go full screen on it. All right. So here's the existing view of the secondary fence from Borderfield State Park. This is taken on the US side looking south. This is what the current design Border Patrol has as if the fence was the same size it is now. It is now 18 foot tall. So even keeping the same height as it is now, this is what we're going to have, not just on the secondary fence, but on both fences. However, that is not what Border Patrol proposed to us 4.5 weeks ago. That is 2 30-foot tall, nearly impenetrable fences. We're only depicting one here. Sorry, there's actually a second one 100 feet away on the primary fence, further obscuring views. Here's the site. We figured that we're figuring that we're in some communication with Washington, so this slide deck might be shared. Here's the site here. You all know the site on the US-Mexican border at the Pacific Ocean. This is the area here. There's 2 fences. So the 30-foot tall wall, the 30-foot tall fence build stopped right here. And this is Yogurt Canyon. So they're going to take whatever they do, they're going to take it from here and build it all the way to the sand. And imagine, not that long ago, this is the way families used to meet close together. We're talking 10 years. This was the primary fence. You could meet, you could see each other back then. You can no longer do that. Year by year by year, the kind of communion that we used to have has been taken away, one small Border Patrol order after another. Here's the site, an aerial view. Again, the 30-foot tall fence build stopped here in the nick of time when Biden was elected, and now they're about to build it all the way to the sand right there. Here's Friendship Park, the center of Friendship Park, and the monument is right at this location. It's worth remembering that only in 1971, when a Republican First Lady named this park, designated it International Friendship Park, she actually had her Secret Service agents cut the strands of barbed wire, and she walked into Mexico shaking hands and hoping for cooperation and solidarity in the future. We have a treaty with Mexico. It was signed in 1848. And in the treaty, part of it says, upon a solid basis, relations of peace and friendship, which shall confer reciprocal benefits upon the citizens of both, and assure the concord, harmony, and mutual confidence wherein the two peoples should live as good neighbors. We're not fulfilling that treaty. Especially in these times, do we need a place along the border that reminds us that the ordinary citizens of Mexico and the US are indeed friends. And we believe the best security that we can have with our closest ally to the south is cooperation and trust. This was a negotiated law. We have had a history of successful negotiation with Border Patrol. This is one of those instances. We proposed, I spoke of this earlier, a 60-foot rolling gate in the secondary fence that could be opened up on some weekends where we were expecting big crowds. And we had many events every year that had hundreds of people. Friendship Park has been closed since before COVID. We also negotiated at the beginning when we were negotiating with them in 2009. They were reticent to allow people in this space. So we designed a series of, we didn't want they wanted to do like a really kind of 5-foot tall chain link fence leading to the center. And we said, well, what if we do like state park, like bollards and curving ropes like you see at state parks? And what if we design it so the bollards can be moved incrementally farther and farther out so it opens up? And we'll start it like really tight together. As Border Patrol said, okay, we'll do it. We'll start it like really tight together, which they did. Within 1 month, it was open to its all the way out to this bottom diagram. And it stayed that way for many years until slowly Border Patrol started taking away old promises. Shortly before they started going backwards in their negotiations with Friendship Park, we have long wanted connectivity, not just the historic marker at Friendship Park, you could call it the center of Friendship Park, the Binational Garden to the east, and access to the beach to the west. These are 3 really important accesses that we have been negotiating with Border Patrol for many years. We had done several diagrams, and we're discussing like what kind of furniture could we have that they would approve of. We were getting pretty far for a long time. We had some imagery of discrete meeting places where you wouldn't have to stand right next to another 35 people. So then you could whisper to your friends and loved ones across the fence. So this is the condition. It's one of the most grotesque and ugliest meeting places in the world, but it's also one of the most important. And you all know that, the stakeholders, how important it is. If you're seeing your grandchild maybe for the first time, you would travel, wouldn't you? You would travel 1,000 miles or more to do that, and Zoom would not be good enough. If you were seeing your parents, what if you were seeing your parents for maybe you thought it might be the last time? You would travel again. And people used to do this commonly because there's no substitution for people being able to look in each other's eyes, talk quietly, touch each other. These are the kind of things we need to have happen again at this space. I already spoke about this, but this gives you an example of like, oh, let me just go back. This is kind of the verbiage at the bottom. The installation of the 60-foot long, I can't read it because I have stuff in the way, but it was so exciting because they had just finished the installation of this rolling gate. We were talking about increasing the hours at Friendship Park where we would be able to use it. And well, that was from 2010. Things were a lot different then. But I feel like we can return to that kind of communication. We have a chance anyway. We're going to sure try. We're going to give it a fair shake. Just the common activities that happen at Friendship Park. Imagine instead of dirt between the fences, if it were designed more like a park for people. And why can't we do that? Of course we can. These are the kind of things we want to hear your voice on. Not just what you want the fences to look like, but what you want the space to be like, and how do you want it to be projected? What do you want the material of everything to be? Lots of details that you can think of. And here's the problem of the mesh. You can only touch your pinky fingers through this mesh. It's the most ungratifying thing that you can imagine. There used to be a lot of activities here, a lot of them run by Dan Wattman, all sorts of activities. Really anything to bring the two cultures together, to bring families with families, friends with friends, and remind us that we're one region. And we want to return to that feeling. We want to send a message and to the rest of the world and to the citizens of the US and Mexico that we are friends and allies. And look at the people touching. We should be able to touch through the fence. More gathering. Finally, this is the last slide. I mean, even though Friendship Park has been closed for, since I don't know what year, since before COVID started, stakeholders like yourselves still do their best to come down here and connect with their friends and allies across the border. It's an amazing effort that you've all done, and we want to improve upon these conditions. Thank you. With that, I'll turn it over to Michelle Landis to take the presentation the rest of the way.
It's on mute, sorry. Thanks, Jim. We look forward to getting your feedback. At the end, it's really when Jim and I are presenting, you guys become little thumbnails, so we can't really see when hands are raised. So we look forward to hearing from you at the end. So we'll run through this really quick, maybe 20 minutes or so. And so a little different perspective on Friendship Park. This has to do with some of the historic and cultural uses that you may or may not know about. So we're excited to share this. Okay, there we go. I got all kinds of screens popping up here. All right, so similar to Jim, you've got the context of being in the very southwest corner of the United States and the very southwest corner of Borderfield State Park. It's interesting to note that this historic monument is only visible now on the Mexico side. The last iteration of wall improvements had to pull the wall forward. And so our original monument installed in 1851 is no longer visible from the US. Actually, on the far right is a view of, if you're looking through the mesh, if you could get into that enforcement zone, what it would look like on the US side. So on one side, you see this very robust, colorful, well-used, well-loved, planted green park. And then on one side, you see dusty, dry, a couple trees remaining park. And if you weren't familiar with this space, and maybe I didn't have the labels, you would think that this was the United States side, but it's not. This is the Mexico side of the park, and this is the US side. So I think we're falling short on creating an international gathering space. Also important to note that this is the only place along the southwest border where there is a park where you can come and meet. If you were on the northern border, there's several of these parks that were heavily used during COVID for families to come together. So this really interesting park sits in a very unique environmental context. This is sitting in wetlands of national importance. A lot of different special status habitats occur here. A lot of research happens here. You've got sand dunes, you have salt marshes, you have tidal systems. So very productive and important habitat areas surround Friendship Park. And in addition to that, there's a lot of cultural and historic context to this park. There are Native American use areas that fall all around the park and in the general area. We also have a lot of interesting World War II activity and training facilities and coastal defense bunkers that happen within Borderfield State Park, and a lot of artifacts still around in existence. One thing I find it very interesting is the Portola expedition came right through just east of Friendship Park. And that, of course, is the journey of Father Serra moving up to kind of start the Presidio and the first mission in San Diego. And there was a campsite in Goat Canyon, just east of the park. So a lot of people haven't kind of connected that. So there's all these interesting things happening in Borderfield and in the environments. And then, of course, the center, the heart of our park is our historic monument. So as Jim talked about, the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo ceded Alta California to the United States. And you have a binational survey team come together and set the point of origin for the country, which is the location of our historic monument. And the original monument was Monument 1 was installed in 1851, and it was uniquely different from the other 6 monuments that were installed across the border, and became very quickly a tourist destination in the kind of Victorian times. And in that era, one of the things people would do was they would just chip a little piece of the marble off and take it home for a souvenir. So in 1894, the marble was of the obelisk was refinished, and it was renumbered as Monument 258. And there was fencing put around it to protect it from souvenir hunters. So that monument that's kind of on the south side of the wall is the original monument installed in 1851. So we kind of move into the postmodern era, recent past, jumping forward quite a few years. And you've had a military past use, and now the land has become returned to surplus. And so part of Borderfield State Park land is purchased by the people from California, and part of it is donated as part of this land grant from the Nixon administration's Legacy of Parks. And this kind of is an interesting graphic where you can see this division line, and this is really the division line between the City of Imperial Beach jurisdiction and City of San Diego. August 18th, 1971, Pat Nixon comes out and does an inaugural ribbon cutting to this park. It is declared the first phase of International Friendship Park. And as Jim mentioned, she planted this historic tree. It's kind of back and forth whether that's the original tree or not. We know it is the correct species. Whether it was replaced at some point or not, we're not sure. But she does have the Secret Service cut the barbed wire and walks in to greet adoring fans in Mexico. So that's kind of a fun little side foray that probably made the Secret Service very anxious on that day, I would imagine. In 1974, you have the monument placed on the National Register of Historic Places. And there's a park design that really celebrates this moment in time. You can see each country has put their national flag, and there's small granite markers and plaques that commemorate this event. The flagpole and the plaque and the base, the granite base, still exist on the Mexico side. I'm not sure when the flagpole disappeared on the US side. We know that the marker and plaque disappeared during around 2012 with some of the renovations when it was already in the secured area. So here's a view of the park in 1986. Although this area is fenced, you still have some visual permeability and the ability to kind of connect with your loved ones. Also, the bull ring is a significant piece of architecture from this era. It is the largest bullfighting ring outside Valencia, Spain, and it was opened in 1960. Obviously, bullfighting has fallen out of favor, and I think there's, kind of how can Mexico repurpose that building? And I'm sure someday they will find something interesting to do with it. but that is definitely in the backdrop of this park. So we see kind of some of these elements mapped out. You can see where the Pat Nixon tree falls and the context within Borderfield State Park. And then moving into the present era. So really starting in the 1990s is when you see the real fortification of the border occur. This is a response to the debt crisis in Mexico and the war on drugs. And so military surplus kind of runway panels are used, mounted vertically, to create this wall to control access across the border. Prior to that time, a lot of times families could just ride horses, kind of go under the barbed wire or around the barbed wire and meet with their family on the other side. And I certainly have people in my circle who talk about doing that in the 80s. 1990s, you can kind of get a closer view of what that fencing condition through Friendship Park, but there's still the opportunity to engage with your loved ones and meet with them quietly and be able to connect. Of course, we have the tragic terrorist events on September 11th, 2001. This really sets a series of things in place to secure our borders even further. You have lots of money available for border construction projects in 2006 and 2008. That's the point where the statutory waiver or statutory exemption of all environmental, historic, and cultural protections for border projects are put in place. So some of you may know that nothing is protected from these border projects, which has been a problem throughout the Southwest and something we're certainly concerned about here. In 2008, the state land returns to federal control, and the double fence construction commences. So you can see the condition in 2008. Moving into 2012, again, the wall is pulled back away from the monument, probably having to do with the footing of that wall not being allowed to cross into Mexico's territory. And then present day, you can't even approach the secondary fence. This is the line of no trespassing mounted currently. So you definitely can't see the monument or visitors on the Mexico side. So 2012 construction, you can kind of see the progress of, abandoning the monument on the south side. Friends of Friendship Park was very proactive in trying to get the park reopened. And the caveat was the 1/4-inch mesh. So we're very fortunate to have Maria Teresa, who documented a lot of this construction so beautifully over the years, but you can kind of see what that looks like in person. I visited the park on a weekend, maybe this was 2018 or so, and this was a pretty typical Saturday, no events happening, but you can see the number of families who are using this park to meet with their loved ones at that time. 2012 had damaged the binational garden. So I know Jim was involved in the design efforts to recreate that. And from about 2012 to early 2020, it was a pretty robust native plant garden and a lot of concepts of, kind of the fauna being able to cross and the pollinators to cross one another and to be a human gathering place with the plants around. But in January 2020, the US side is destroyed. A lot of reasons about why that happened, a lot of changing stories. There was limited planting, much smaller scale garden planting allowed to be restored, but then access to maintain that garden has been cut off. And so currently there's no access being granted to maintain that garden. So we touched a little bit about this waiver process. So many of you may be familiar with the typical NEPA or CEQA process, where you go through for a major project an environmental impact report or environmental impact statement, which is an extensive document for something this size. It's probably a 1,500-page document. It explores different alternatives. It discloses what cultural, historic, or environmental things that may be lost in the construction of the project. All of that is waived. So these border projects do not have to follow that process. There is a environmental stewardship plan in place. I actually placed a link to that in the chat file for any of you who might have that kind of background where you want to read what criteria is protected. I would say this is not nearly the robust document that we are typically expect to see in our normal kind of legal NEPA or CEQA process. And so it calls out things like the identifying historic or cultural resources. It should be calling out how those should be accessed, maybe interpretive elements being added to the project because of so much extensive history in this area. Those would be things that would be nice adds to have, but some considerations on that cultural and historic consideration. From a governmental consideration, things about access to the park, both vehicular and pedestrian. There's been, some talk of reworking the roads to make them less seasonally impacted by rains. We think that's a great effort to get more people to get to the park more reliably. Other things that are considerations is the staffing and the training of the people who are actually in the park when it's opened up to the public. Should that be Customs and Border Protection officers, or is there a possibility that there might be other staff that are more park-like staff, more like ranger staff or something that could instead be the interface between the public? Operational funding is a big challenge. That is always the reason that they shut the park down is, we have agents, but we don't have agents to staff them. We need to move them to another area. So one of the things we will be asking for beyond design are considerations like this staffing and the funding and a commitment to keep this park open. And I think there's a lot of great research opportunities. That certainly happens in the estuary, but there's also research opportunities with the historic and cultural context and the kind of cross-personal connection context of this site. Environmental considerations, again, I'll point you back to this environmental stewardship plan is going to detail the way that some of these considerations are handled or may be absent from this plan. We believe the binational native plant garden is a native habitat, so we will be asking for repairs and maintenance considerations for that. But sediment into aquatic systems has been a big factor throughout the Southwest in these border wall projects. There have not been the BMP processes in place. So if that's a concern to you, that might be a good comment point. Of course, water quality is an issue at the border, but then you add the sediment problem to it. It creates a much more complex issue. Habitat protection. So noise from construction can impact some of the special status species that are out there. How the restoration and enhancement of vegetation establishes after the construction, how they monitor that to make sure that it continues to establish. Again, this ESP is going to give you a lot of more detailed information in that regard. And then humanitarian considerations. So Jim talked a lot about the height of the wall. I know we all know that Customs and Border Protection has been very clear that they want the 30-foot high wall. We're hoping that we can justify why maybe there's considerations that this area is so special. It should be treated differently and not like someplace out in the middle of the desert. And then users of the park. In the past, there was daily, weekly, quarterly, annual events that happened at this park. So I think we would love to see those types of events return, how many people are allowed inside the park. When I visited it in 2018, there were 25 people per time, but it wasn't always enforced. If there were a few families, they might go over that. I would say right before the park closed in about late 2019 is what I recall. They had ramped it down to 10 people strictly enforced, which meant people were lined up and they would sit out there for hours and not get a chance to see their loved ones after venturing hundreds of miles away. Again, park staffing and enforcement becomes part of this humanitarian consideration. of, who's the interface person with the users of this park. And then security considerations, and Jim talked about this. We have worked really hard to engage Customs and Border Protection because we know that their enforcement is a key driving factor of what happens in this enforcement zone. And so if we can understand the criteria that they are needing to perform their activities, then us as designers can be creative in the solutions of how we accomplish what needs to happen, both from a human perspective and a park user perspective, but also from a security perspective. And I do a lot of work with military projects locally. So it's not reinventing the wheel. A lot of these are already addressed on our military bases, and how historical areas and cultural areas are protected and how they engage with the public, and clear lines of sight and furniture that isn't a concealment problem. So we know how to do this. There's codes in place that drive all of this. But things we need to consider as designers are things like, where are the agents going to park their cars? Because right now they drive through the whole park, and that's not helpful, to creating a park-like area. There probably needs to be a more dedicated vehicular movement pattern. Where are the camera nest locations located? So considerations for you guys as you're hopefully thinking about responding to our little quick written survey is, what is your past experience with the park, and what do you want your park experience to be? Why you visit Friendship Park, and what are your biggest concerns regarding this wall renovation project now that you hopefully understand a little bit more what is proposed? Can you imagine a wall solution that is acceptable? What would that look like? How transparent should the wall be? And what binational human interaction should be accomplished within this park?